Hi, my name is Jeanette, and I work on the patient liaison team as the patient navigator manager. And I've got Carla here with me, who is also a patient navigator.
Hi, my name is Carla.
So, what patient navigator is essentially is it's a bespoke, high-level service offering of what patient liaisons do. So, we can provide all kinds of extra service offerings, such as visa support, long-term housing, um, international flights, anything that's more complex that a study might need. So patient navigators day to day, we have a large caseload essentially. Anytime patient navigator is scoped for a study, we're doing things such as proactively coordinating, we're problem solving, we're advocating. We do a lot of advocating for patients between the sponsors and the sites. There might be something that a patient believes they need or their family needs that might not be scoped on a service, and we're advocating on their behalf to get that for them. So a lot of what we do actually is anticipate any barriers. So a lot of these patients, these families, they have barriers that are financial, logistical, lots of other challenges that they might experience. Our goal is to help get them past those barriers so that they can participate in these trials.
Yeah, and just to add on that, I think that's mainly what I love most about being a patient navigator, since we get to be there calm in the chaos, and then some patients tend to be scared and overwhelmed with all the logistics, and the fact that we get to just take that away and they could just worry about their health and their well-being and just worry about getting to their appointment. It's a good feeling to know that we take away the stress for them.
I think for me, it's a lot of empathy. In our role, we are required to have a lot of different empathy. We're required to really be able to relate to these patients, to these families. And for Carla and I, we both have young children. So the pediatric studies really hit home for us. We put ourselves in those shoes of those family members, and we're able to determine, what would we want in this situation? What would we need advocated on our behalf to really make sure that we could fully focus on our children or our family? And the same goes for if you're a caregiver for an adult participant. You want your family member, you want whoever you're caregiving for to have that specialty service and be able to feel like they're supported and those barriers are eliminated. Without eliminating those barriers, a lot of people can't participate in trials. We see a lot of financial barriers as well that really limit a participant from participating if they were to have to come out of pocket to pay for those services on their own. So advocating for those families and making sure that they are able to actually participate helps them in so many different ways. And it also on the other end of it helps a sponsor because we're then contributing to the research. So we have most recently advocated for formula. We have a participant who is a pediatric participant and they don't do well on the US formula and they are from another country, and so we advocated to have that formula purchased from the country where they resided previously and actually shipped here to the United States because that is what the baby did well on. That's a great example of something that we advocated for on the patient's behalf that maybe the sponsor wouldn't have thought necessary before we advocated for it.
Think one would be like one had a specific cream that they preferred in their country, and we had to advocate for having that shipped over because they wanted to use that specific cream from their country and not the one in the US.
So we do have participants that will advocate for having Wi-Fi on planes or be able to have paid services such as streaming services. Um, a lot of times these may not be deemed necessary by the sponsor, but part of our advocating is finding reasons why a patient or family might need this service. For one family in particular that I remember, having a streaming service really helped keep their other children busy while they needed to take one child to visits, to clinical trial visits. So advocating that on behalf of the family, once we clarified the reasoning why it was necessary, the sponsor was more understanding, was willing to pay for that service. I absolutely think that these things that we're able to advocate on a patient's behalf for that a sponsor might not be aware of help keep these participants in the trial, and it really aids in the participant retention. Having young kids, I'm telling you, makes all the difference in a service like this because all you think all day, even at night, me and Carla sign off at night and sometimes we're texting about these participants and going like, how can we help them further? Because being a mom, like you don't want to think about your child ever being in that situation. Like it's just It's hard, really, really hard on some of these pediatric studies. And it's
Yeah, and you think of as a mom, what would make me feel more comfortable throughout this process? And I use
mhm,
that in everything that I do.
absolutely. It really helps us advocate better. Even when Patient Navigator is not in play and we're doing something regular on the patient liaison side, knowing how to advocate because we are moms of young children on pediatric studies makes a huge difference, because looking at a lot of these studies, we have participants that are strictly wheelchair bound or they're bed bound, and they are a lot of times pediatric. They can't tie their shoes or they can't feed themselves. Imagine having a child in that condition and you are their only caregiver and you're going to a whole nother country and you've got to travel on a plane 23 hours to get here. I mean, that sounds awful. So making sure that we provide that level of support is so important. Making sure that we do the check-ins with them, making sure that they arrived safe and they got everything that they needed. Sometimes some of the requests that they might need might be something as simple as a different frying pan, and getting that to them could make the difference in their stay. It could be the difference in them retaining in the trial. And that's half of the battle, is earning a participant's trust. Because if you don't have trust, they're not going to trust you with getting their family somewhere safely. They're not going to trust you with arranging their long-term housing because you're not going to know what they need. So it's finding all of those little things that really make the difference.
Yeah. And I think even as a mom, a sister, child, anything, you also know that you need a support system. So that's something else that we also advocate for. If someone needs an additional caregiver to come, we also help with that too.
Yeah,
Because
and
we
then
know that we need help.
absolutely. And imagining that most studies are scoped for one or two caregivers. And if you're going to a whole different country where you've never been, you don't know what that city is like or what that country is like. You don't know what you're walking into, and you're only going there with the clothes off your back and a small luggage and one extra person to help you. I mean, that's stressful. That's stressful. It's stressful to think about international travel alone, but add in a clinical trial and add in all these study visits and getting poked and prodded and doing all of those things. I mean, I can't imagine for these families how stressful that is on a daily basis. So our empathy is very important. Like, we really try to shine that through everything that we do.
We recently had a study where we had all the future visits scheduled for a participant and they were ready to go. But then we had a weather situation with the snowstorms and flight cancellations. So we had to quickly act and make sure that everything was canceled and rearranged for them. And the patient didn't have to worry about, oh my gosh, I had to miss my flight. We took care of all of that for them. It did get their visits pushed back, but we make sure to keep in contact with the site to make sure that everything is set up and then rearranged. And then unfortunately, the patient did get sick after we made the arrangements, but we also helped them cancel and reschedule and change all their visits. But it was the point of the fact that we got to alleviate the stress for the patient so that they just had to focus on their health again, which is why I love doing Patient Navigator, because we just get to help the patient so they don't have to worry about anything else. But that stuck with me because it was a lot of logistics that the patient would have had to take on. And thanks to this, they didn't have to.
I think, to add on to what Carla just said as well, I think something that's really important to highlight with this service is that great science, essentially, it's going to only work if we can have participants participate. In this situation, Carla was able to completely rearrange their travel not once, not twice, but three times. We're talking about a whole schedule visit. Every single, I think there's 12 or 13 visits for this study. And
Mhm.
scheduling that, it's a big logistical challenge, because if one visit gets pushed back, they only have a certain window in which they can participate in those other visits. So it was a lot of logistical challenges working with the family to try to figure out what flights worked for them on each of these days, three different times, you know. So there was a lot more to it than just rescheduling due to a weather cancellation. I think, had Carla and I not been involved in this situation, the family might not have partaken into the trial, because it would have been too much for them to reschedule it three times. We do see this a lot, where if participants are having to book their own travel and come out of pocket for that, they would have been waiting weeks for those refunds back on their cards or into their bank account, and they wouldn't have been able to pay for all of that travel again. I think a big portion of this, honestly, is just clear communication. We want to stay in constant communication with not only the patient, but with the site, with the sponsors. Anytime we've got a weather cancellation or we've got something that's going to cost the sponsors additional money that's outside of the control of the participant or the site, we keep the sponsor informed. We work with the site to figure out new dates. We work with the patients to make sure that those dates work with their schedules. We've got these processes in place that we follow to a T. And part of that, honestly, is again collaboration. We collaborate with our travel coordinators. There's a lot of different moving pieces to the puzzle. So staying aligned really allows us to put out great work. It allows us to make sure that these participants are taken care of, that they feel supported, that they feel like they don't have burdens. We're trying to reduce the site burden as well. So us dealing with the participant and scheduling all of their stuff and making sure that they're taken care of ultimately eliminates the site burden as well. And it makes the sponsors feel more comfortable. The sponsors trust that we are able to get the work done at the end of the day, and we do just that.
Agree.
We're very patient centered. We want to make sure that the patients never feel alone. They never feel like they are, or well, that they have to figure everything else on their. Sorry, I can't talk. They have to figure out everything on their own. We don't want them to ever feel that burden. From a site's perspective, us talking with the participants, us arranging the travel and dealing with the reimbursement questions eliminates a lot of overhead on the site end. The sites aren't only dealing with generally one study at a time. A lot of times they have their regular work and then they have several clinical trials that they might be running at their site. So for them to answer the phones daily and answer simple participant questions about travel or logistics, any type of reimbursement questions, it really takes up a lot of their day. So we have the ability to eliminate that site burden by giving sites our single point of contact hotline that they can give out to these participants where they can reach us and we can answer all of those questions. And if we need to work with the site to get a better answer for, what day their study visit might be on, we do just that. So we want to eliminate that back and forth and that site burden, that patient burden, and ultimately it eliminates the sponsor's burden. The sponsor then again can trust us that we know what we're doing and we're able to adequately help the site and the patient.
But I also think that the participant does benefit a lot from the service because, again, how we eliminate that burden for them, but even in the sense where it also eliminates the burden for the site to have to be on top of everything because they do have multiple studies and multiple patients in their center, and it is kind of hard for them to juggle it. So I have had sites tell me that having our service helps them a lot. And it's great to know that they can count on us to assist with the patient side and the reimbursement side. So I think it is also even, but it's helpful for the site and the patient in more ways too. I've gotten a lot of feedback from families saying that they're so thankful that they have our service here to know that they have a specific line that they can call and reach out to us if they have any questions or doubts. They feel comfortable knowing that when they call us, they can get the response that they need. And at the end of the call, they're not feeling confused anymore. And the sites, they said that they are very happy to know that they have also easy communication with us. If it's via email or via phone, they know that they're happy to know that every time they call us, that they'll get a response. So they're very happy to know that they have a service with us here.
I think to add in there too, we see a lot of sponsors that come back and they bring other studies to us. And if they've had a study that has previously had Patient Navigator on it, they continuously add it in because it's quickly become something that they don't want to run a study without. They realize the value that Patient Navigator adds into their study. They realize that it adds to patient retention, which again helps them at the end of the day. There's definitely been a big uptick in Patient Navigator as a whole. I think as we're continuing to get the service out there and more studies are finding out about it, they want this service. We are a bespoke, high level service offering of what the patient liaison team does. So we extend and do a lot of extra things to help a study out to reduce all of the burden across the board. Studies are becoming more complex in nature, but not only that, but we've got studies now that are globally recruiting because the patient population of which a site might be we're experiencing where they may not have anybody that has that particular disease or whatever they're studying, where they've got to recruit globally, so I think Patient Navigator really helps in those aspects of international travel and visa support and long-term housing, relocations, things of that nature. There are other competitors that offer a similar service, but they're not able to provide the high level that we are. They're not able to provide that well-defined support of us really being there for the participants. There's times where Carla or I are on at 2 a.m. or 4 a.m. or we're answering an email or calling a participant on the weekends. That level of support I've seen nowhere else.
Sorry to add on. We do regular
No, you're
check-ins
good.
with the families also to make sure that everything is going smooth and okay. So that's also something that sets us apart too. Since we do regular check-ins with the family, they do tend to remember us and always feel more comfortable with us and developing that relationship with them. I think it's important and essential because it also makes them feel comfortable enough to be able to reach out and not hesitant if they ever have any questions or concerns. It makes them feel more comfortable. So it is important for us to develop relationships and keep them too.
Yeah, I think to add on to that as well, part of that is making them feel like they're still human. A lot of these families and participants that are participating in these clinical trials, a lot of times at the end of the day, after being poked and prodded and going to clinical trial visits all day long, they just don't feel human anymore. So adding that human aspect back into that for them and talking to them like they are a normal person and we're just here to support really can make the difference in their day. So I personally would want somebody watching this to just remember that we are empathetic people. We've got one of the best teams that I've ever experienced. Everybody on our team wants to help participants. We want to make sure that they get the support that they need to participate in these clinical trials. Um, they go through a lot, these patients. They could be scared or sick or under pressure. It could be the hardest moment of their lives. And we want them to know that they're not alone. We want to be able to support them and help them get through that and be able to look back and say, wow, Scout helped me or my family get through this clinical trial and it made a real difference in our lives.
Agree that they're not alone and we're always here to help and always happy to help, which is what I always lead with. Always happy to help.
We've really enjoyed talking about our Patient Navigator service here today, and we really would encourage you, if you think that this is beneficial to you as a family, you as a participant, or you as a sponsor, to reach out to us.
You can reach out to us with info@scoutclinical.com.